There comes a point in your life where the version of you that once made sense, well, it just stops working. The habits don't fit anymore. The relationships feel off. The way you used to think, react and move through the world starts to feel out of alignment. Not dramatically at first, but subtly, quietly, like something inside you is shifting, even if nothing on the outside has fully changed yet. And that's where most people get confused, because they think growth is supposed to feel like progress, like clarity, like becoming more confident, more certain, more put together. But real growth doesn't start that way. It starts with discomfort, with disorientation, with a feeling that something you've relied on for years is no longer stable. What you're experiencing in that moment isn't failure. It's not regression. It's the beginning of the death of your old identity. And that process is not clean. It's not comfortable. And it's not something you can rush through. Because you're not just changing what you do. You're changing who you are. The version of you that got you here cannot take you where you're going. Every identity you've built came from a specific context. The way you learn to communicate, the way you handle conflict, the way you seek validation, the way you protect yourself. None of it is random. It was shaped by your environment, your experiences, and what you needed at the time to function, to belong, to survive. Maybe you became the one who avoids conflict because it kept things stable. Maybe you became the one who overachieves because it earned you recognition. Maybe you became independent because relying on others didn't feel safe. Those traits worked. They served a purpose. But what helped you at one stage of your life can limit you in another. And this is where growth creates tension. Because the very traits that once protected you can start holding you back. And letting go of them doesn't feel like improvement. It feels like loss. You are not just upgrading your life, you are dismantling a structure. Most people approach growth like it's an addition. They think they can keep everything they are and simply add new habits, new skills, new mindsets on top of it. But real transformation doesn't work that way. It's not just building, it's dismantling. You have to question the beliefs that shaped you, the patterns you've normalized, the roles you've played for so long that you don't even realize you're playing them. And when you start doing that, things get unstable, because you're removing parts of your internal structure without immediately replacing them. That creates a gap, a space where you don't fully recognize yourself anymore. And that space can feel uncomfortable. But it's necessary, because you can't rebuild something new without clearing what's already there. The loss of identity often feels like confusion, not clarity. One of the biggest misconceptions about growth is that it leads to immediate clarity. In reality, it often leads to confusion first. You start questioning things you never questioned before. You notice patterns you used to ignore. You feel disconnected from versions of yourself that once felt solid. And instead of feeling like you're moving forward, it can feel like you're falling apart. This is where many people panic. They try to rush back to what's familiar. They try to regain the sense of certainty they used to have. But that certainty was tied to an identity that no longer fits. So going back doesn't actually solve the problem. It just delays the process. To move through this, you have to accept that confusion is part of the transition. You're not supposed to have everything figured out. You're in the middle of change. You will grieve the person you used to be, even if they were limiting you. This is the part that most people don't expect. Even if your old identity was tied to patterns that didn't serve you, it was still yours. It was familiar. It was predictable. It gave you a sense of self. Letting it go can feel like losing something important. And that loss can bring up emotions you don't immediately understand. Sadness, nostalgia, even a sense of emptiness. You might, miss the version of yourself that didn't question everything, the one that moved through life without this level of awareness. That felt more certain, even if that certainty was, limited. But that doesn't mean you're going backwards. It means you're processing change. Grief isn't just about losing something good. It's about losing something known. And your old identity, even with its flaws, was known. To move through this, you really have to allow yourself to feel it. Not rush it, not suppress it, but just acknowledge it. Because what you don't process, you carry. Your environment may, resist the new version of you. As you change, your external world doesn't immediately adjust. People are used to interacting with a certain version of you. They expect certain behaviors, certain reactions, certain roles. When you start shifting those patterns, it can create friction. You may notice that some people respond differently, that certain dynamics feel off, that conversations don't flow the same way. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're no longer playing the same role. And not everyone will adapt to that. Some people may support your growth. Others may feel, uncomfortable with it, because your change challenges what they're used to. This is where you have to make a decision. Do you shrink back into your old identity to maintain comfort? Or do you continue moving forward, even if it changes your relationships? That choice isn't always easy, but it's necessary, because you can't grow and stay the same at the same time. You will feel like you're in between versions of yourself. There's a phase in this process where you don't fully identify with who you were, but you haven't fully become who you're becoming. It's an in-between state, and honestly, it can feel a bit unstable. You might question your decisions. You might feel uncertain about your direction. You might feel like you don't fully belong anywhere. This is perhaps one of the most challenging parts of growth, because there's no clear identity to hold on to. But this phase is also where the real transformation happens. It's where you're not acting from old patterns, but you're still learning what the new ones look like. To move through this, you have to become comfortable with not having a fixed identity. Instead of trying to define yourself immediately, focus on how you want to act, what values you want to follow, what behaviors you want to reinforce. Identity will form from that over time. Becoming someone new requires consistent action, not just reflection. Awareness opens the door, but action is what moves you through it. You can understand your old identity deeply and still remain stuck in it if your behavior doesn't change. Because identity is reinforced through repetition. What you do consistently becomes who you are. So if you want to become someone different, your actions have to reflect that. Even when it feels unnatural, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when part of you wants to go back to what's familiar. This is where discipline comes in, not as restriction, but as alignment. Doing what matches the version of yourself you're building, even when it doesn't feel automatic yet. Because over time, those actions stop feeling forced. They start feeling normal. And that's when the shift becomes real. You don't find your new identity, you build it. A lot of people wait for clarity. They think at some point they'll just figure out who they are and everything will fall into place. But identity doesn't work like that. It's not something you discover fully formed. It's something you build through decisions, through what you choose to do, what you choose to tolerate, what you choose to prioritize. Each choice reinforces a direction, and over time, those directions create a sense of self. So, instead of waiting to feel like the new version of you, act like them. Not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently, because identity follows behavior, not the other way around. The process never fully ends, but, it does become easier to navigate. This isn't something you go through just once. There will be, multiple points in your life where you outgrow who you are, where the identity that once fit just sort of no longer does. And each time the process repeats: discomfort, letting go, uncertainty, rebuilding. But each time you handle it a bit differently, because you've been through it before. You recognize the signs, you understand the process, you trust that the instability is temporary, and that trust, honestly, makes it easier. Not easy, but definitely easier, because you're no longer trying to hold on to something that's already changing. You're moving with it. The real shift happens when you stop trying to go back. At some point, you realize that going back just isn't an option. Not because you can't physically return to old patterns, but because, you see them differently now. You understand what they cost you. You understand why they no longer fit. And even if they feel familiar, they just don't feel right. That's when the shift becomes permanent. Not because everything is perfect, but because your awareness has changed. And once your awareness changes, your choices follow. If this kind of depth is what you're here for, real growth, real transformation, no surface-level distractions, then you already know this isn't a quick process. It takes time, it takes honesty, it takes consistency. But honestly, it's worth it. So, if you're ready to step into the next version of yourself, even if it means letting go of who you used to be, make sure you subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because most people try to hold on to who they were. And that's exactly why they stay stuck.